The Logitech G-Cloud. I wanted one, but I really didn't want one. And when I got it, I really didn't want to like it. Let me explain what all that means, and let me explain how I tested it up against some other devices. Hey everybody, it's Chris from FamilyGeekery. And if you've been paying attention to the handheld market of different devices, gaming devices, then you probably know this Logitech G-Cloud. You've probably seen it, you've probably watched some reviews, and the reviews, they all pretty much have the same consensus. It's too expensive, and that's the consensus. It's too expensive. Great device, too expensive. If I wanted to cut the video off right now, that's probably what I'd leave it with. But I wanted to go a little bit more in depth into what its pros and cons are, and how I like to test it up against some of your other options. And I've seen in many reviews, hey, if you just spend a little bit more, you can get a Steam Deck. Well, that's probably true, but you're not really comparing like devices. And other people say if you spend a little bit less, you can get the same type of device, maybe a little bit cheaper, maybe a little bit smaller, not the same brand. And that may be true too. And then the other option is, well, if you've got a great phone, you don't need one of these. Just load up your phone with the same type of games and get yourself a handheld controller. So actually, that's the way I wanted to go about this, is compare this all-in-one device here, which is an Android-based handheld 7-inch screen device, up against a modern phone, modern Android phone, with a couple different options. One option is you get yourself a device like this Razer Kishi, and you just slap this on your phone and turn it into a handheld gaming device. Or you get yourself a controller like this with a stand, and then you get yourself a handheld gaming device. So those are my two options to compare up against this particular Logitech G-Cloud. So in the process of testing this thing out, there's a couple different things I wanted to test. One is, since it's Android-based, I wanted to check out some just regular native Android-based applications, some games, and how well they play on this versus how well they play on a phone with a controller. Now, the phone that I'm using here is a Google Pixel 4 XL, which is a decently spec'd, not the newest, greatest Pixel in the world, but a decently spec'd phone that should give this thing a run for its money. So that's step number one, testing out native Android games. The next one, obviously, is the main reason to have a device like this, and that's cloud gaming. So we're going to test out some Xbox Cloud, maybe some Steam Link, and see how that works on this device versus on the phone with the various different controller adapters. And then the third thing is we want to check out some emulation. So I've got loaded on here some RetroArch, and we're going to test out some emulation on this device again versus the phone and the controllers. So that's going to be the test bed to see how it performs, how it feels, and the overall experience of using this as a handheld gaming device. So before we actually get into testing the games and talking about the experience, let's talk quickly about the different devices and what the test devices are. So obviously we know this is the Logitech G-Cloud. It's a 7-inch 1080p screen, and it says to have 12 hours of battery life. It's got a Snapdragon 720G processor with 4 gigs of RAM. Now, let's compare that up against the Google Pixel 4 XL, and this has a Snapdragon 855, which is a little bit faster, with 6 gigs of RAM. It's got a 6.3-inch screen, so you can see how that kind of lines up. 6.3-inch screen, and basically like a 1440p resolution on it. So a little higher resolution, a little bit smaller, a little bit faster processor, probably not as good battery life. And to pair with this phone, we've got a Razer Kishi, and this is a USB-C plug-in device, so it's not wireless, it's not Bluetooth. We're not going to have any latency issues. So we're going to slap that on there. And then this guy here, it may look like an Xbox controller with a little phone clip on it, but it's actually a Rotor Riot. That's this guy right here. Wired game controller for Android. So it's also got a USB-C cord on there, so no latency. So we can compare that directly up against this guy here. I've reviewed one of these controllers before for an iPhone. In fact, it's this guy right here. A little different mechanism for clipping the phone on, but this has a lightning connector instead of USB-C. So I've got a video on that you can see in the description below. So that's the devices we're going to be testing. Of course, you can always take some kind of Bluetooth third-party controller, or even like a regular old Xbox controller, and hook that up to a phone. But that's not what I wanted to test, because that brings in the whole equation of Bluetooth, and I just hate having to constantly, go into settings and find the device and all that good stuff. I just want to turn a thing on and start playing. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get this guy going with some games and see how it plays. Alright, so first up, like I said, I wanted to do some native Android gameplay, and this is Grand Theft Auto 3. And before we even talk about the device, if you had told me 20 years ago that I'd be able to take the game that was taking up so much of my time on the couch, playing in the old PlayStation 2 days, and throw that basically in my pocket with a handheld device, I'd tell you were crazy. But this is absolutely a great device for this type of gameplay. The 7-inch screen is great. It's just about perfect for sitting on the couch and playing with the, just playing with the device in your hand. 1080p is great. Of course, probably better, higher resolution than the game was when it came out on the PlayStation 2. And the controls are fine. You do have to, on some games, you do have to set up the controls to understand that there's an analog controller. But in this case, I just turned it on and it just worked. So I don't have any problems. Performance-wise, this obviously is more than capable. This is a 2001 game that was ported over to Android, probably 10 years ago. And it plays on all modern devices just fine. The buttons, the analog sticks, they're all good. There's nothing you can do about some of the quirks, like your right stick. On all controllers, it works the same way. It doesn't work like your modern first-person shooters do. But this is, this is just a good experience. And to be honest, taking this device and testing it out over the last couple weeks and playing this game, just tooling around town and causing mayhem, right in the palm of your hand, it's great. So I'm going to say that this device for this type of application is perfect. There's no complaints here. Alright, next up is the phone, which is the Google Pixel 4 XL again, with the Razer Kishi controller. And honestly, sitting at this distance, sitting at a normal distance, maybe sitting on the couch playing some games, the size of the screen isn't that noticeable. It is 0.7 inches difference, which is a noticeable difference, a lot more noticeable than you'd think for, what 0.7 inches is, but statistically it's, mathematically it's a higher percentage of screen size. Now that's kind of compensated though with the fact that this is a little higher resolution screen. So I'll be honest, the graphics are a little bit crisper on this particular screen, but we're not comparing a cheap phone, with a gaming device. We're comparing a pretty decent phone. So the argument of saving money and using your own phone is only really a good argument if you either find a phone real cheap, which in this case I did. I found this, used on Marketplace. This isn't my normal phone. I bought this just for playing Android games, and or if you just have, a phone already and you just need to buy the controller. Obviously that's going to be a price savings. But for a dedicated device, you're probably not saving a whole lot of money buying a controller and buying a phone versus buying the G-Cloud. Control-wise, they're pretty comparable. I think ergonomically wise, the Logitech is a little bit more comfortable in the hand than this. The quality of the sticks and the quality of the buttons are pretty similar. Maybe the buttons are a little bit nicer on the G-Cloud than the Razer Kishi. But the control sticks are pretty similar. They're both, what do they call these, like concave control sticks. They both have a very similar amount of throw to them. So overall, the biggest difference is the ergonomics in the hand, and in this case, I'm not even using the shoulder buttons. This old game just uses the A, B, X, Y buttons for accelerate and brake. So I'm not using a full, ergonomic hold on this thing. If I was, then I think the G-Cloud would even be a lot more comfortable than this particular device to get these shoulder buttons. So controls, similar. Ergonomics, I'm going to give a plus up to the Logitech. And then screen, I'm going to say that the extra size is nice. And on an older game like this, probably the resolution isn't a huge concern. So I'm going to say they're going to be pretty similar. Overall sexiness factor, if that matters to you, I'm going to say sexiness factor goes to the Logitech, obviously, because this is a thing that you slap onto your phone. So it's not the sexiest thing in the world, but it is a valid option for playing games like this. Let's go to the next option. Alright, next up is this Razer Riot controller with the phone clip and the USB-C cord. And obviously the same phone, the same display as the Razer Kishi. So we can ignore that. We're just talking about the controls here, which is a better option for controls as far as this versus the Razer Kishi. And the first thing I'll say is ergonomically, this controller feels good. And that should be obvious because this is basically the standard type of controller we've been using for the last 20 years. They figured out how to make it feel good in the hand. So the button placement, the controls themselves, the ergonomics, all very comfortable. Using this and looking at the screen is not awkward at all, other than the fact that I had to put the phone offset a little bit because the volume buttons are right here, and I didn't want this pushing down the volume buttons. It would think it wanted to be reset or something. So that's a little awkward. Having this cable right here, even though it's got a nice little Velcro tie to keep it tidy and not just dangling all over the place, it is right in the way of your finger. Not a huge problem, but it is a tiny bit annoying. But then I guess the biggest takeaway I've got for this particular device itself is this is about as cheap as a controller that I've ever had in my hands. I mean, it's all just hard plastic, very hollow sounding. It works fine, it feels fine, but there's no texture at all on the grip. It's just very cheapy feeling, and that's different than the white one I showed you earlier that I used with the iPhone. That one felt a lot upgraded versus this. Now, like I said, you could do this same type of setup with a higher quality Xbox One controller, but I'm not sure if you're going to be able to directly connect it in, or if you're going to be using it Bluetooth. So I guess, long story short, on this particular device, ergonomics feels great, controls feel fine, the quality of the controller itself is a little cheapy, and then other than that, the sexiness factor, I think this one is going to go all the way into the toilet. This just looks like a silly, janky setup. I've always said that, even though it works fine, even though it works, I would play this no problem. It just looks funny. It looks like, it looks like an afterthought, which it obviously is, versus the G-Cloud, which you're paying a lot for the overall design of it. So Android gaming, we're good with that. Let's take a next step into some cloud gaming. Alright, next up, we're back to the Logitech G-Cloud, and we're playing a little Xbox Live, or Xbox Game Pass Live, whatever they call it, the online streaming version of Xbox. And Xbox is obviously light years ahead of its competition as far as like cloud gaming goes. I love PlayStation, but they're just not quite there yet with cloud gaming. In fact, a lot of people I've heard refer to this Logitech device as the device that Microsoft would make if they made a portable gaming device. So they call this like the Xbox Portable. And I mean, there's a good reason for it. It comes preloaded with the Xbox. It logs right in, it sees the controller, and it's ready to go. So again, great screen. The latency, since this is cloud gaming, I do notice that the car isn't as responsive as it was like if it was directly connected if I was just playing this on my Xbox. But you're going to get that with everything. That has nothing to do with the controller. That's simply to do with the service itself. And it's not bad, right? I'm not playing Fortnite. I don't need to have exact precise controls. I'm just rolling through the desert in a Jeep, I guess. So like I said, the service works great. This is a great controller for this type of service. 1080p screen. You're not going to, even though some of the other streaming services say that they can stream higher resolution than that, you're probably not going to have a good experience streaming higher resolution than 1080p on a portable device. So the screen is going to be perfect for this. The controls, ergonomics, of course, are perfect for this. And this is what this device is made for. Load up your Xbox password, play any game that you want from the service. That's, of course, assuming that you're paying for the Xbox Game Pass service, and have a good time. Try out a bunch of different games, and don't have to worry about sitting in front of your console. So I'm going to say this is a good experience on this Logitech device. Alright, next up, we're back to the Razer Kishi, back on the Google Pixel 4 XL, and we're playing that same Forza game through the Xbox service. And first thing I'll mention is, yes, the ergonomics, as I expected, is going to be a little bit different than on the Logitech. Not horrible, but just not as comfortable, especially since this doesn't have like the same nice grip as the Logitech did. It has a textured grip on the back of the Logitech, and it's more shaped like just a big controller versus something that, now this is nice that it can fit in your pocket once you fold it down. You know, it folds all back together. So that's nice, but I don't think anybody would be surprised to say that the ergonomics just aren't as good. Performance-wise, there's literally no difference. Latency is about the same as I saw before. Again, this is a more than powerful enough phone for this type of service, so I have no concerns with that. Besides that, though, the little bit of difference screen size is making more of a difference than I thought when it comes to like reading text on the screen. So if you're just playing a game like this and you're just driving, not a big deal, but if you need to read any text like that right there, I can barely see what some of that text is saying. And if you were playing a dialogue heavy game, maybe like an RPG or something with a lot of reading, then that could be a game breaker for you with this 6.3 inch screen, which is actually a pretty decently sized phone versus that 7-inch screen on the Logitech. So overall, this is fine if this is all you got, but I'm gonna give the plus up to the Logitech for this particular service. All right, last up with the Xbox service here is this Riot controller, this Xbox looking controller that we looked at before, and the same is holding true, right? It's a cheapy feeling controller, but it is ergonomically nice. It is a clunky setup with the screen off-centered and the cable and everything, but it's not horrible. One thing I do like about both this and the Razer is the fact that since they are directly connected with the USB-C cable, you don't need to charge the controllers themselves. There's no batteries, no necessity to charge at all because they're not Bluetooth. It's just directly powered. It will take a little bit of power away from your phone, so battery life may not be as great as what you thought, but it is convenience-wise. It's always nice to not have to worry about putting batteries or charging a controller. So that being said, thumbsticks are much nicer on this controller than on those smaller ones. The cheapiness of it is fine. It's forgivable considering this is a clunky setup to begin with, and latency, everything, it's all the same. The screen's the same. We're just comparing really this versus the Razer Kishi as far as the controls. So I would say it's a little bit clunkier, but a little bit more comfortable at the same time, if that makes sense. So for that case, I'm going to say that this kind of is a wash with the Razer Kishi. Still not a bad experience, but it's just, like I said, I guess clunky is the best way to put it. Even if you're playing this and you want to set it down, to go get a drink or something, it's just, sometimes it sits up, sometimes it falls over. It's just clunky, but it's better. It's certainly better than playing like this, with the on-screen display, on-screen controls. So we're gonna go ahead and call this a decent experience, and probably still, because of the screen size, the font size, and everything, still give the advantage to the G-Cloud in this case. So let's go ahead and check out some retro gaming with some emulation. Alright, so when it comes to emulation, I don't think it's going to be any surprise that this thing will handle all the classics, all the Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, all that stuff. So I wanted to try something a little bit harder, and this is going to be the Dolphin emulator running right in Android, and this is Tony Hawk Underground 2. So you can see that we've got the FPS up in the upper right hand corner, and it looks like it's running around 49 to 50 or so on this game. Now I do have it upsampled to 2x normal resolution, so 2x native resolution, and I wanted to keep that the same on both devices, both this and the phone, so we can have kind of a good comparison. And this is a good experience. It's a great screen, the controls are great. I was a little concerned about it being too small to really enjoy a game like this, but I've got no problem at all with this game here. It's a 7-inch screen, decent controls. With any emulator, it takes a little time to control and set everything up. This wasn't like right out of the box, ready to go, but that's going to be true for any emulation, any kind of emulators, especially on Android. So it's all set up, it's working great, and even though it's not a full like 60 FPS all the time, I don't have any problem with this experience at all. So let's go ahead and take a look at this game on the phone. Alright, so here we are with the Razer Kishi, and really we're not testing out the controller so much as we are testing out the phone itself. We've already discussed the controller and their pluses and minuses, so now we're looking at the performance. So I've got this same game loaded up with the same settings. This is 2x native resolution, and I'm getting a pretty solid 59.94, so it looks like a pretty solid 60 frames per second. So it does look like this phone with the Snapdragon 855 is going to be a little bit better at this emulation stuff than the Logitech G-Cloud, which I guess is to be expected. That Snapdragon that's in the Pixel 4 XL is pretty good, and it's well known for its emulation abilities. Much better at emulation than I am at this game. But just wanted to test this out and see what kind of frames per second we can get. And let's go ahead and go on and check out a different type of game. Alright, so here we are back with the Logitech G-Cloud, and we are playing in RetroArch PS1 game. So this is Driver. You Are the Wheelman. One of my favorite games from the PS1 days. And you can see I've got this at 2x oversampling, or 2x resolution. And I'm getting a pretty good 50 to 60 frames per second. Obviously it depends on how much is going on the screen. And I've got it set up to emulate a DualShock controller, so it's using the analog controls. And this is a lot of fun. This is reminding me back of the old days, playing this game on the couch before the Grand Theft Auto days. But this was one of my favorites, and being able to throw this on a portable device like this and load it back up is a nice Hey, that was rude. But yeah, the controls feel good. Screen looks good. And, at 60 frames per second as it's peeking out here. Definitely a good looking game for its time. These guys just have some problem with me, I guess. There goes my hubcap. So we're going to try out this game on the phone as well. Yeehaw! So let's go load it up on the phone and see how it does. Alright, so here we are, same game, same settings. As far as I know, I've got everything set up the same way. This is a 2x native resolution. And I've got it set at the original 4:3 aspect ratio. You can set it to stretch, but I didn't want to do that. It may look alright, but I just wanted to keep it the way it was here. And I'm not seeing a huge difference between the two devices as far as performance. If I wasn't looking at the numbers at all, then I would swear they were pretty darn close. I do notice that more cops you got on you, the lower the frame rate drops, and I guess that makes sense. Because all these other cars are just dummy cars, but the cops actually have a little bit of AI to them. So other than losing a little bit of screen real estate, I think the display looks just as good as it does on the Logitech G-Cloud. So really it just comes down to your preference of how the controller feels. And we don't need to test the other type of device, because really we're at this point, we've made our decisions on how the controls feel. We're really just testing to see if the phone can handle or perform the same or better than the Logitech G-Cloud. In this case, in this particular game, I'm going to say they're pretty darn similar. So let's go ahead and put these devices down. I've played enough. I'm going to come back with some final thoughts. While we're at it, go ahead and write in the comments below what you're doing as far as Android gaming. Do you have a phone and a controller? Did you pick up one of the G-Clouds? Do you have a different device? Let me know what you're doing and how you like it. And that way we can all learn from each other. And while you're at it, go ahead and click that like button while you're down there. So let's come back with some final thoughts. Alright, so let's talk about these things, and I hope that this video has helped you out if you are looking at options for this type of handheld gaming or portable gaming. Hopefully this video has helped you out with that. So we've got the Logitech G-Cloud, which we said from the very beginning, and everybody else has said it, great device, too expensive. And I think they came out a little high on price when they brought it out at $350 just before the holidays, and then they put it on sale right away at like $299, and that's kind of where it sat. It was a sale price, and it's still kind of there no matter where you look. Now, I paid nowhere near that. I found someone locally that bought it, got it for Christmas, didn't like it. I guess they couldn't take it back or something, and I picked it up for pretty darn cheap. So that's the only reason really that I even have this thing with me. And like I said, I thought it was cool. I've watched a lot of reviews on it. I thought it was nifty, but I wasn't willing to spend anywhere near that price. So luckily I found it locally, and really I thought I'll test it out and probably ditch it because I didn't think it was going to be worth it. But now that I've played with it for a couple weeks and I've experienced the other options, because really these are pretty valid options for doing the same thing. We saw the same games, we saw the same settings, we saw the same performance between all these. Just a difference of screen size, really, a difference of ergonomics of the different types of controllers. And really, another thing that needs to be said is this thing, you just pick it up and you turn it on and it's ready. You don't have to adapt anything to anything. You don't have to have different devices in different parts of the house. You just pick this thing, turn it on, and it's ready to go. launching the games through the built-in launcher was nice. You can get into the full tablet mode and use this as a 7-inch, Android tablet, which is nice. So you can play a lot of nice tap games with it on a 7-inch display. So it's definitely got its pros and its cons. And really, just like everybody said, the only con for it that could have put the same processor in it as this one, the Snapdragon 855, but really that might have just hurt the battery life a little bit more, brought the cost up more, and they just definitely can't afford to bring that cost up anymore, because you're just going to keep on hearing people say, just skip it and buy a Steam Deck. And that is, even though it's a different device and it has a different purpose in life, that is still a valid concern. So keeping the price low, that's a good deal for this thing. They're going to have to bring it down even more if they want this thing to be adopted a little bit heavier. So really what I came up with after testing all these things, playing the same games on them for a couple weeks now, is I just like it. And like I said, I didn't want to like it, but I like it just for that ease, that professional polish, the overall feel to it, and the screen size. I mean, it is nice to have that full 7-inch screen and be able to do more things with it. So hopefully this has helped you out some. Again, these aren't bad options, but for me, I think if I was going to play this long term, it's going to be this guy here. And I just happened to be lucky enough to get one at a price that I was willing to pay for it, and hopefully you guys do too. So again, let me know in the comments below what you think about the Logitech G-Cloud, what you think about these other options, what kind of setup do you have and do you like it, or are you looking for something different? This is going to help shape this industry. These manufacturers need to know this feedback, because this type of portable gaming, this cloud gaming on the go, is not going to go away. It's proven itself to be something that people want, and I think we're going to see more of it down the road. So that is going to wrap up this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, again, I appreciate that thumbs up, and go ahead and hit subscribe if you want to see more types of tests like this. I love testing out these different types of devices and getting a feel for what works and what doesn't work. So thank you as always for watching, and until next time, peace out and geek out.